An old man sits by a fire, deep in a world that no longer exists anywhere on Earth. He cannot chew. Every tooth in his mouth is gone. Around him, younger hunters are tearing into raw meat with their bare jaws, ripping tendon from bone in seconds. He cannot do that anymore. Not one bite. And yet he is still alive, still breathing, still sitting there in the firelight surrounded by people who have not left him behind. Most people assume a toothless human in the ancient world was already as good as dead. No teeth meant no meat. No meat meant no strength. No strength meant no survival. That assumption is wrong, completely wrong. The real story of what happened to a toothless ancient human is not a story about death. It is one of the clearest, strangest proofs we have that early humans took care of each other long before anyone wrote down a single word about kindness. Teeth are not decoration. They are tools built directly into the skull, ripping, grinding, crushing bone to reach marrow. Every single one of those jobs depends on a full, working set of teeth, and in a world with no dentists, no fillings, no soft blended food, losing them was not rare. It happened constantly. Old age wore enamel down to nothing. Infection rotted roots from the inside. A fall, a fight, a bad piece of bone caught wrong in the jaw, any of it could cost a person every tooth they had left. Here is the twist. Losing your teeth in the ancient world should have been a death sentence. For most animals, it is exactly that. A wolf that loses its canine starves. A big cat that cracks a molar on bone often dies slowly over weeks, unable to bring down prey or finish a kill. Nature is not gentle about broken tools. And yet in humans, something different happened, something that separates our species from almost every other predator on the planet. In the country of Georgia, in a site called Dmanisi, researchers uncovered a skull nearly 1.8 million years old. This was not modern Homo sapiens. This was an early human ancestor, walking the earth long before language, long before fire was fully mastered, long before anything resembling a settled camp. And this particular skull had almost no teeth left at all. The jawbone had healed and closed in around the empty sockets. That healing is the key detail. Bone does not reshape itself around a lost tooth in a matter of days. It takes years. Years of that jaw sitting there, empty, closed, healed over. How do researchers actually know a jawbone healed over years rather than days? Bone remodeling leaves a signature. Fresh bone, right after a tooth is lost, looks sharp and raw around the socket, almost wounded. Over months, the edges begin to smooth. Over years, the socket closes in entirely, filled with dense, mature bone that looks nothing like the jagged opening left behind the day a tooth actually fell out. Anthropologists can read that timeline the same way a tree's rings reveal its age. The Dmanisi jaw was not slightly healed. It was completely closed, smooth, remodeled bone with zero trace of the original socket left visible. That level of healing simply does not happen in weeks. It demands years of survival, years of a body being kept alive by something other than its own physical capability. There is also the question of infection, and this is where the story gets considerably more dangerous than most people assume. Losing a tooth is rarely a clean event in a world without dentistry. Broken roots left behind can rot. Exposed nerve endings can become doorways for infection to spread directly into the jawbone itself, and from there, in the worst cases, into the bloodstream. A single untreated dental infection, something a modern person solves with an antibiotic prescription in an afternoon, could kill an ancient human within days. The fact that both the Dmanisi individual and Shanidar 1 show healed, non-infected bone around their tooth loss suggests something worth considering, that whatever wound care existed in these communities, however primitive, was often enough to prevent a fatal infection from taking hold. Which means this individual did not die the week their last tooth fell out. They lived for years afterward. Years, with no way to chew raw meat, no way to crush a bone for marrow, no way to do the single most basic task an early human body was built to perform. Someone was feeding them. Sit with that for a second. Nearly 2 million years ago, before spoken language as we understand it, before any recognizable culture, before anything we would call civilization, another human being was choosing to keep an old, useless-looking companion alive, chewing food down for them, softening meat into something a toothless mouth could manage, sharing meat that could have gone to a hunter, to a mother, to a child, and instead giving it to someone who could offer nothing back in return. That is not instinct. Instinct protects the young, the strong, the ones who can still reproduce, hunt, and carry the group forward into the future. Instinct has no logical reason to protect an elder who cannot fight, cannot run, cannot chew. What we are looking at in that ancient jawbone is not instinct. It is something closer to compassion, showing up far earlier in the human story than most people ever imagine. So how did they actually do it? How does a group with no fire in some periods, no cooking pots, no knives beyond crude stone flakes, keep a toothless person fed for years? Fire changes this calculation even further once it enters the picture. Cooked meat is already softer than raw meat before a single tooth ever touches it, fibers broken down by heat rather than by chewing alone. A toothless elder living in a group with reliable control of fire had a meaningfully easier road than one living before fire was mastered, another layer explaining why tooth loss, while still dangerous, was never automatically fatal across the long arc of human evolution. Groups that mastered fire earlier may have been able to keep toothless members alive more easily, adding one more quiet advantage to a technology usually credited only with warmth and protection from predators. The first answer is mechanical. Meat can be pounded. Stone tools, the same rough flakes used for cutting hide and butchering carcasses, could crush and tenderize flesh into something closer to a paste. Pound it long enough against a flat rock and raw meat stops needing teeth altogether. It becomes something closer to soft pulp, something a gum-lined mouth could manage to swallow even without a single molar left to grind it. The second answer is biological, and far more surprising. Human saliva contains enzymes that begin breaking down starches the instant food enters the mouth. Chewing was never the whole story. It was the first step in a longer digestive process that continues working even when that first step is skipped or shortened. A toothless elder gumming soft, pre-mashed food was not eating efficiently, not by any modern standard, but they were still extracting real nutrition, still surviving on it, day after day. The third answer is social, and this is the part that changes everything about how we picture ancient life. Someone had to make the decision, every single day, to soften food for a person who could not do it themselves. That is not a one-time act of kindness. That is a sustained, repeated choice, made over and over, for years, by people who had every reasonable excuse to stop. Dmanisi is not the only proof we have either. In the Shanidar cave of northern Iraq, researchers uncovered the remains of a Neanderthal man who lived tens of thousands of years ago, an individual anthropologists nicknamed Shanidar I. This man had lost most of his teeth long before death. One arm had been amputated or withered away entirely, useless for any physical task. He was likely partially deaf, and evidence suggests his eyesight had faded significantly as well. By every physical measure that mattered to raw survival, he should have been abandoned early in life. He was not. Bone growth around his injuries shows healing that stretched across years, in some cases decades. A man who could not hunt, could not fully hear danger approaching, could not chew solid food, lived on inside a group of Neanderthals who chose, again and again, to keep him fed and protected. Two entirely different human lineages, separated by more than 1 million years and thousands of miles, arriving at the exact same conclusion. A body that stops being useful does not automatically stop being valued. Ask yourself something. If you were living in that world, hunting for your own survival every single day, would you keep feeding someone who could give nothing back? Modern hunter-gatherer societies studied by anthropologists give us a living window into this exact question. Among groups like the Hadza of Tanzania, elders who can no longer hunt effectively are still fed, still included, still kept close to the fire. Not out of sentimentality performed for cameras or outsiders. Out of a structure baked directly into how the group survives. Elders hold knowledge younger hunters do not have yet. Where water pools in a drought, which plants heal a wound. How to read weather 3 days before it turns violent. An elder's mouth might be empty, but their mind is not, and early humans appear to have understood that trade long before anyone could explain it in words. This reframes the entire skeleton found at Dmanisi. That was never a story about a broken, failing body being tolerated out of pity. It was a story about value being recognized in a form that had nothing to do with physical strength. A toothless elder became living proof that a group had learned something most predators on this planet never figure out. Strength is not the only currency that matters for survival. There is a colder side to this story too, and it deserves honesty rather than a soft ending. Not every group did this. Not every toothless individual found the same mercy. Harsh seasons, food scarcity, a group stretched too thin. Any of these could have changed the calculation entirely. Survival is never guaranteed kindness. What the Dmanisi skull proves is not that every ancient human treated their elders well. It proves that the capacity for this kind of care already existed, deep in our evolutionary past, long before anyone assumes we were capable of anything beyond raw survival instinct. Compare that single skull to how wolves in Yellowstone National Park behave today, in one of the most closely studied wild predator populations on Earth. Researchers tracking wolf packs have documented older, weaker wolves receiving a share of a kill, even when they contributed nothing to bringing that animal down. Pack survival, it turns out, sometimes depends on more than just the strongest jaws in the group. But even there, the tolerance has limits. A wolf pack under real strain will abandon or push out a member who becomes a genuine burden. Humans, even nearly 2 million years ago, appear to have carried that instinct further than almost anything else walking the earth at the time. So what actually happened when an ancient human lost every tooth in their head? They did not simply die. In at least one documented, physically proven case, they lived on for years, fed by hands that were not their own, kept warm by a fire they no longer had the strength to build alone. Their mouth went silent in one way, empty, useless for tearing meat. But their place within the group did not disappear with it. That single healed jawbone, sitting quietly in a museum drawer for decades before anyone fully understood what it truly meant, tells us something no cave painting ever could. Long before we had language sophisticated enough to promise loyalty to one another out loud, we were already living it, feeding it piece by piece into the mouths of the ones who could no longer feed themselves.